Everyone, welcome to Manufacturing Hub, or I suppose welcome back to Manufacturing Hub. All of our longtime viewers will know that I've been on a couple of weeks of hiatus here. I was planning to come back for Vlad's conversation with you last week, and as I was driving to go do the show, I had completely lost my voice. So here I am, at least mostly voiced, to go ahead and kick off the robotics theme. So super excited to go kick off the robotics theme for Manufacturing Hub. The entirety of April will be robotics. I'm very excited to go ahead and get into a bunch of conversations surrounding that. We do want to thank the Robotics Summit and Expo folks for going ahead and sponsoring this conversation. Juan and Reshape, as we'll introduce them in just a minute, are going to be there. The Robotics Summit and Expo are May 1st and 2nd in Boston. We'll go ahead and make sure to have links in all of the comments and descriptions and the show notes if you guys want to listen to that. Without further ado, I'd like to officially welcome everyone to Manufacturing Hub. This is episode 160, and welcome our guest, Juan Aparicio of Reshape Automation, to the show. Juan, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to talk with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time, Juan. The one comment I will add, you'll also be giving a talk at the Robotics Summit, right? And I think once Dave posts the link, people can certainly find more information about that and the time slot that you'll be presenting. That being said, if we can maybe dive in before we talk about robotics, I think you have a very interesting background. And if I do say so myself, from the control system side as well, I'm not going to spoil maybe the punchline. Could you give us a bit more of your background, walk us through, your career journey, and ultimately talk to us about what you are doing today?
Wonderful. Well, I hope it doesn't take the entire 9 minutes that we have for the podcast. I will try to summarize. The accent comes from Spain. So I was born in Madrid, decided that I didn't like the warm weather enough, so I went north to Sweden to study and enjoy the riding a bike in the snow. And then at some point, I saw on campus an advertisement. I'm a electrical engineer and computer science by background. I saw an advertisement on campus that Siemens was recruiting for the United States. I said, okay, Siemens, what does Siemens do? I think they do dishwashers and phones. And to my surprise, no, they were doing very cool stuff. And I was hired in the US, moved to Princeton, have been in the US for already more than 14 years, and enjoying every minute since a couple of years also American with a couple of American kids, but keeping the accent. So I spent 10 years, most of my career at Siemens. And I was telling Vlad and why he got excited immediately. I could tell that I could relate to him just seeing at the background because I was part of a group that developed the firmware that goes into those PLCs from Siemens, the 7-1500s and 7-1200s. And I was dealing with topics that relate from compression, how do you do historians inside a PLC, all fun stuff. Even how do you use also some of the controllers for other things outside factories like traffic control. But my background is more telecommunications engineer. So I studied, I think back then was 3G. Now we are probably at the 6G. But it felt always a little bit incremental. Like, I'm going to give you, with all the magic in the world, give you a little bit more bandwidth. And you're going to use it because you started sending images. In the future, we are going to send virtual reality programs. But as I was growing in Siemens, I got into robotics and fell in love with that, right? The opportunities to that. The fact that we are still moving tags around, that we, instead of modern programming paradigms, the fact that you still program with a calculator from the 80s, right? If you see a robot controller, you think that you have travel in time and say, wow, why is this so big? And why there are so many, do you really program with a calculator? And that was very surprising, but also the opportunities, right, that I saw in the field. So at some point, my call to fame was designing the factory of the future for Siemens in Princeton. I had a lot of fun with my colleagues back then to imagine what the future could be. For example, importing to the US the first mobile manipulator. It was a KUKA KMR back then, so it's an autonomous mobile robot with an arm on top. Couldn't fly to the US because it had batteries, so we had to flew it to where Vladimir lives, to Canada, and then rent a truck. So it was a lot of fun. And then in 2016, moved to Berkeley, had the chance to ramp up a team called in advanced manufacturing, working very closely with the ecosystem of universities in Silicon Valley and startup companies. That was transformational for me because it was 2016. It was kind of the hype of autonomous driving. And I was evangelizing that AI should actually be used in manufacturing. That's the place where we have more control, where we can have more impact in the short term. But no, it was the age where all the money was flowing into money and intellectual talent was flowing into autonomous cars. So I was slowly but gaining some supporters. And I think now is definitely manufacturing and robotics are on the bright spot and on the like in everybody's mind. It wasn't back there as easy. But one of the questions that why I came all the way to the West Coast was to see if AI could really revolutionize the world of robotics. And I will talk more about that in this robotics summit and expo. Thanks for putting the link in the comments, Dave. But also hopefully we can touch some of these points today. Then I, during that time, had the luck to work and manage amazing researchers and engineers that are still running, and that group is incredible in the Siemens group in Berkeley. And we did all sorts of crazy projects like manufacturing assembly uniforms for the army with robots, creating 3D structures for parts that go to space, putting flames on robots for, that was a nice project for doing brazing operation for a oil and gas company. I mean, when I told my EHS responsible person that I was gonna not only have robots, but have robots with flames, I think he got a heart attack, as you can imagine. So lots of fun, lots of also disinfecting robots during COVID. That was interesting. And I can talk more about touch other crazy projects that we did. But at some point, I'm also starting. Two things happened during that time. I was part of the starting team of the Advanced Robotics in Manufacturing Institute, the ARM project, the ARM Institute, headquartered in Pittsburgh. They're still going on strong. It's a Manufacturing USA Institute that helps de-risk all the robotics technologies from technology readiness level 3 to 7, usually the valley of death, that's what it's called. So they fund projects and help also from both education and workforce development and also technology projects. I also help Robert Huska and also John Lisi from GE to start what is now the AI board for A3, for the Advanced Robotics, for the Association for Advancing Automation A3. So very proud of these two kind of groups that I help a little bit start. And then I got bitten by this startup bug. Right? When you get bitten by the startup bug, it's a disease. So you cannot get it out. There is no cure. So I joined Ready Robotics as the VP of product. Ben and Kel were the founders, are still the founders, and amazing team out of Columbus, Ohio, helping to democratize robotics by standardizing the way that you program robots, right? Every robot, you pick a blue robot or a yellow robot, they are programmed differently. So they want to break all these barriers. A great team going on strong, founded recently by NVIDIA and Rockwell. Then after working there, helped introduce into the world their operating system that is called Forge. Got the opportunity to work in my backyard in San Francisco in a startup called Rapid Robotics, Robot as a Service. Great team, amazing tech that we were able to deploy dozens of robots across the US in small and medium manufacturers. And then, the disease of startups got worse during the summer. and decided to be the crazy founder. And I founded Reshape Automation with my co-founder Carlos Vanegas. It's a funny story how we met. I reserve that for the version 2 of this podcast. And we founded the company. Were able to convince some crazy investors to trust in our vision, and they have been amazing, very supportive. Schematic Ventures and be partners in particular. And now we are 10 people all over the Americas, and we very focus on our mission. That is that we want to 10x the amount of robotics and automation, particularly in the US, in the next decade. And so we are, and in order to do that, I can talk about that. This is a long introduction. I told you that I was going to take 79 minutes. So in order to do that, we want to start not only on the adding more capabilities to the robots, but we want to actually help humans at the beginning of this automation journey to have all the tools and all the information needed to make good decisions and fast decisions and to automate quicker and with better ROI. So that is my journey in 15 years in a
Yep. And Juan, I think, look, we can take this in many directions from there. I think that we'll definitely want to talk about your company, and we have a bit of a presentation, I guess, prepared, ready to go. That being said, I picked up on a very important point, and I wanted to make that comment and maybe get your thoughts on that as well, because I think it's relevant to the humanoid robotics that are sort of attracting the money, as you put it. In 2016, it was more the automotive space, and we were trying to get self-driving cars, but ultimately it helped also. The advancements in that space helped advance robotics, I think, even in the industrial spaces and other verticals quite a bit, right? And so I think that, sometimes, I guess, in depending on which circles you're in, on which side of the debate you're in, I think people either subscribe to the idea of humanoid robotics, and then some of them do not like the idea as much. But I think overall, as the manufacturing industry, I think we will certainly benefit from the money being poured into that research and development. And I think you've certainly seen the research and development firsthand and how it was then applied to other industries, even though it may not have been, let's say, a complete success initially. So I guess, like, what I'm trying to say is I'm curious to get your perspective also maybe on some of these less certain projects and how they can benefit robotics and other technologies as a whole.
And I love that we start the podcast with the controversial topics. That's what we want to put on the table, like humanoids. Let's talk about humanoids. Yeah. Definitely agree, right? Like, we are at this stage in technology in robotics versus 10 years ago because of all the advances that happen in the perception domain, particularly both on the algorithmic, but also on the hardware side, like decreasing the cost of, like, the first LiDAR that I bought was around, I think, 17K or almost 20K. They used to cost 70K. Then they went down to 20. Now you can get them for $300. And it's amazing how that technology, how has it matured, and also the side effects that it had on the industry. That's also why I'm on your team. I'm very excited about the investment in humanoids. I think it's a matter on that topic. It's not a matter of if, but when. And I think that's the important topic there that people, I guess the controversy comes from, okay, they cannot do anything useful today. And that is probably true, right? Like, a robot has to do something useful. That's the definition. Unless you're automating a task, it's more a toy than an actual machine. But you can see how there is a progression. And what is difficult to determine is the timeline. And as happened with the autonomous cars, the time is the most difficult thing. It's not the if. Yes, they are going to come. I have been in hundreds of factories. I can see how, if we get the dexterity right, in particular, that's what I'm more excited, more than locomotion, dexterity and autonomy. There are millions of tasks that can be automated. However, this will take time until we get there. And until then, yes, all the investment I think it's welcome for the industry. Much I'm happier that it goes there than it goes to other areas like crypto, for example. But at the same time, I'm saying that like there is not probably such a thing as general purpose robot, right? What we need is also what will move the needle in the foreseeable future are the technologies that are there today. It's also important to understand that on that topic in particular, the goal is kind of the most optimal solution. If you think about a lights out factory that's still probably years away, probably will not contain any, if you had to start from scratch, any humanoid robot, any robot with the shape of a human, because it will be highly automated. And there are other forms, other shapes that are more optimal to do that. Where it will come very handy probably is even in areas outside manufacturing, right? Like where humans need to be there, like caring of people caring, right? Or at your home, eventually, in the construction area, things that are where there will be humans for the foreseeable future, and they need to coexist in an environment designed by humans. But yeah, for some reason, we always think, oh, robots equal manufacturing, but there are other areas that I see even more a brighter future for humanoids. So, summary, very excited. Difficult to guess when they will be, when we will see like really humanoids at hundreds or thousands.
And I think, you know, the interesting point on top of what you're saying, Juan, is that it's not only, I think, a technical challenge, which I think we as the engineers tend to focus on. There's a lot of sort of, and you've worked on government projects, so you understand how difficult that may be to change regulations, but also, you know, the end users, even in the industrial space. And we'll talk about, again, what you're trying to do with your company, which is educating, I want to say, end users who may not be as tech savvy, I guess, if I was to put it that way, on the importance of putting in those technologies. And if, again, I draw a parallel to, let's say, cobots maybe 10 years ago, I think it was the same type of a reaction where we don't see that on the plant floor today. And then it took many years to where now cobots are almost like a known thing and everyone kind of accepts them. And that is maybe almost the first option when you're talking about applications like palletizing, right? Versus you go back 10 years, the idea of a robot without a safety cell was almost unheard of. So I think it's important to consider all aspects of what it takes to go through that transition. And I think, again, at least talking for myself as an engineer, we only see the mechanical and the electrical and obviously hardware and software challenges, but I think that there's a lot more that needs to happen for us to get there as an industry. But anyways, I think it's just interesting discussions in the robotics space.
I'm very super interested, in particular in the area of safety and standards. Right, being able to be ahead of the curve is very difficult. As a matter of fact, like safety standards in AMRs are relatively new. Right, I think the technology was kind of first before we even put the standards. And the good thing is that we should start now to also think about the safety implications of humanoid type robots. Like what happens if they fall down, right? That's a kind of, that doesn't happen with a normal robot, right? They don't just fall. But we have seen in many videos, it can happen with a humanoid. And what are the precautions? What should we do? And how do we protect the other people working around? Because, as I said before, they are meant to be work with people too, right? This is same with cobots, and it will also be based on the task, not so much on the hardware itself, right? The same thing with a cobot. Like from my project that I mentioned before, the moment that I put a flame on it, it was a cobot arm. I can guarantee you that, but not with a flame. That stops being collaborative, and then you need to start thinking about fencing, about light curtains, about other. That's why safety assessments are so important. And will become even more important with things that we now don't know how to regulate from the point of view of a standard.
Absolutely. Dave, what are your thoughts?
I like that. I guess one, I think humanoid robots just make me very uneasy looking at them as a whole. I don't disagree. There are lots of interesting applications. They just make me very uneasy. I was at a show a couple of weeks ago. I saw them in person, and good news one, they potentially make me more uneasy my face seeing that their face-like features, as opposed to the alternative of me just seeing them through the screen. But I wanna go and kind of double down on that safety and Juan, you talked about going through the process of helping, I think it was the AMR Institute, go and de-risk some of these robots. And I thought that was a really interesting point of some of your path into what I think of as why Juan loves robots. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you did? Because I feel like that's probably one of the kind of least flamethrower awesome highlights, but maybe one of the most important things, one of the most important things that you did, and one of the most important things that lots of us can do as we look at robotic applications.
Yeah, good question, Dave. So the reason why these institutes, like ARMY is part of a manufacturing USA network of institutes all over America, and it was after the Obama administration that decided to, okay, let's fund this a little bit copy the Fraunhofer Institute model in Germany and bring it to the US. And the reason why is that recognizing that a lot of technologies, there are great technologies coming out from academia. This is TRL. If you look from these technology readiness levels from 1 to 9, 1 to 3 is basic research. Then 7 to 9 is what you can mature and have operationally in a plant in manufacturing. But then there's this valley of death, and it's 3 to 7. Great technologies, but they need push, they need to be de-risked in order for them to be adopted. And that's where government, in this case, government funding, can play a big role, because for companies, that's too risky, right? Why are we going to invest that money if the result can be that, no, this technology is not ready? So that's why this institute exists, to fund projects that can push technology from TRL3 to TRL7. Then there is still effort. I mean, don't get me wrong, the 7 to 9 is still a big road to climb. Some even say even higher. But at least the basic research has been de-risked, which in robotics, as we know, it is fundamental, right? Because and I think what is one of these issues with the industry, that one of these original cores is that everything looks good on YouTube videos, right? There is like when you see a demo, it's like that cherry pick time that the robot did this amazing cleaning of your home, and then you post it on YouTube and you think, oh wow, this is the state of the art. Robots tomorrow are gonna come and do my dishes. But then you don't see the 10 other times that it failed. And that is, I think, what is essential also to see that for something to work, it has to work reliably. And that's very, very hard. That's incredibly hard. Like some people say that it takes, for any technology, it takes 10 years to being able to use it in the real world. I had some colleagues in the past that said if you can get a PhD on a topic in robotics, then that is not ready for production, right? It still needs to, like now, things like, I don't know, structure picking, like that was the holy grail of robotics, now is mainstream, but it took a long time. And I think that's why it's so important to these private-public collaborations to work together into solving a problem. The nice thing, and I am a big advocate of the ARM Institute, is that it's a very unique also umbrella for companies that are usually in a vendor kind of user relationship to come together and solve a problem, be on the same side of the table. That's very unique, right? Where else? Like if I am working, for example, we had a project with FedEx. If I'm working with them, usually I will be a vendor and they will be the customer, right? And the relationship is different because you are always selling me something, right? But on these kind of projects, we are on the same side of the table. And for example, okay, let's solve the problem of interoperability in AMRs. You have 10 different brands. How do we make them talk together? Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. So that was an example of a project that we did together, but we solved the problem together. And I think that is also very important. Also, other areas that has a huge potential that hasn't been unlocked yet. But if it was unlocked, everybody will benefit. another area that we work, for example, back then was textiles and how do we automate the production of garments like jeans and things like this. Mm-hmm. Everything is overseas, right? There is the industry in this country of textiles is minimal when it comes to Assam to create a t-shirt, for example. And that's because it's very hard. These things are hard to automate. And there was a lot of projects and a lot of effort there, because if we were able to do that, that's $1 trillion industry that can get unlocked.
Absolutely.
So I'm big believers on this. I mean, I don't think that the big government is here just to help us, right? We have to do a lot of things in the public community, but on the other side, in the private world, but on the other side, for this kind of topics, I think it's super useful to have some kind of seed that helps you mature these technologies.
If I can just, Dave, like interject and check my, I guess, understanding of TRL and also for the listeners. So just if I understand correctly, there's a challenge between going from like an R&D type of project into going to like full production. And so you get, is that a financial subsidy or is it, you know, getting to market subsidy? What does it look like for those projects?
Usually, imagine that you had a promising technology out of a lab in a university. Let's say something that is still useful, hot, but still researchy, is adding tactile sensing for robots. Let's put it that way. Tons of applications if that was mature, but still these sensors today, they don't last long. Like the technologies today, like they will not survive the cycles of typical manufacturing application. So the way that these institutes work is from time to time, they release project calls where the team members, where different companies can team together, propose a topic and say, hey, we want to work on tactile manufacturing for, let's say, the manufacturing of clothes, just to put an example, right? And if that gets selected, then you get funded to mature the technology. And it's all about maturing technology. So saying, now it's in a lab. At the end of this project, at least it needs to be in a proof of concept, in a representative environment, in that case, in a factory. If we are able to do that, then the project is successful. There's still a lot of work to commercializing, and that's not covered by this kind of funds, which makes sense, right? Because otherwise, that's where the private industry kind of has to take over and then say, okay, now it's my turn to make this into a product. And make money out of that. But the previous part is what is extremely helpful to come with money, because usually the private sector will not finance this kind of more still R&D, like hardcore R&D.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Thanks. Yep.
No.
Appreciate it.
No, absolutely. So I think that's really interesting. And I want to jump more into that and a bit of the startup bug that Juan has said. But first, I want to go thank some people. And I feel like this is the most perfect time in order to go thank the Robotics Summit and Expo for helping us bring Juan on and for sponsoring this episode. And the reason why I want to do it is because the Robotics Expo and Summit, or Summit and Expo, May 1st and 2nd in Boston. Juan is one of the speakers. They've got a whole range of robotics for things for everyone to go see, right? They've got the mature robotics, they've got some industrial robotics and some industrial robotics opportunities, but then they've got a whole slew of different robotics, from everything from kind of very early stage in mass robotics, which they are partnered with in order to go ahead and build this, which is very much like a robotics startup incubator, all the way through a lot of the mature companies that you are going to go ahead and see. So again, if you guys are interested in learning more or interested in going to see the show, we've got links in both the show notes and the description below. If you guys want to go check out the Robotics Summit and Expo, again, thank you to the Robotics Summit and Expo for sponsoring the show and for helping us bring Juan on. Juan, kind of having said that, I really like the transition as you were talking about of going and bringing more public money. And I think the TRL is more of like a Canadian opportunity. There are lots of like SBIRs and other acronyms in the United States that I've seen groups successful in bringing some of that technology typically derived from university out into more commercialization opportunities. I've seen a lot of really interesting technology come out of that. I've seen the technology that actually makes it to commercialization phase is pretty cool. And I personally think to myself, wow, it is amazing that someone is able to do that. I'm not sure anyone would have given them the years and funding in order to be able to, the years and funding in order to be able to go through that process and do so. So I kind of want to transition into the startup bug. I mean, can you maybe expand a little bit more on the startup bug and why you and your co-founder, I think you said his name was Carlos, decided on building Reshape and building it kind of in the format that you guys have?
So there were probably two numbers that explain our startup the best. One of them is 800,000. The other one is 30,000. And I don't know if you can guess which one is which, but the 800,000 are the number of open job recs in manufacturing right now. A similar percentage if you look into warehouses, like is really astronomical amount of open jobs. And that is going to grow to approximately 2 million by the end of the decade, which if we don't fill it, it's going to cost the US $1 trillion. So it's not a small problem. Now, I hope we keep educating people and bringing them into the trades. It's extremely important to bring people into manufacturing. These are amazing careers, and we need more of that in this country specifically. And I'm very glad with some of my friends tell me, like from high school, hey, I'm teaching kids to program robots. And I get so excited. How old are they? And they are 6 years old. And it's like, wow, I cannot use them for 20 years, maybe. So what do I do in the next 10 years? And this is a big problem. Like until the end of the decade, what is the short-term solution? And on the other side, this other big number that we have is 30,000. And what are 30,000? 30,000 are the number of robots that we deployed in this country last year. Not even in this country and Canada, so North America. So 30,000 robots. Just to give you an idea, there are around 30 million phones, 17 million cars. The spending in IT is like, compared to the spending automation, is like automation is dwarf to it. It's really a drop in the bucket on. But we hear all the time that, hey, robots are here, they can take the jobs, they're going to take our jobs. Well, that's not true, right? And if it was true, these two numbers wouldn't exist. One will be at the level of the other, or it will be the other way around. And the reality is that robots today can do 80% of the tasks that humans do in manufacturing, usually on average. And I say tasks because it's very important to differentiate than jobs. But people get confused, right? It's not jobs. Like I haven't never seen a robot taking the job of a human. They take some tasks out of that. And in consequence of that, the job of the person may change. And we have to acknowledge that jobs will change with their future. Not only with the robotic side, but also other technologies like Gen AI will change how do we work in the future. That being said, we need more of, I think one of the most important problems in our generation is really decoupling human labor from the labor side of things, right? So we need to automate more in order to grow our GDP. There's only so far, these two things are extremely tied. And as we are not getting more people and we are not getting more people into manufacturing, we need to automate at a higher speed. One may say, okay, automation is more than robotics, and that's true. So these two things have to be also taken into account, not only the spend in robotics, but also the spend in automation. But it's a good proxy to say that more, every time that there has been more investment in robotics, at the same time has grown or the actual jobs and the actual people working in manufacturing. These two things are very related. It's not one against the other. They two, as you increase the investment in automation, you are able to grow, so you are able to hire more people and to keep your operations running. So that's why we existed, right? Like this, there is 30,000, there is 800,000. How do we deploy not 30,000 robots in this country, but 300,000, right? let's not say 3 million, but let's add 1 0 at the end, right? That seems more reasonable. And if you think about, okay, let's compare us with other countries, even though there are differences, but for example, China is deploying 12 times more robots than we do, right? This is the reality, right? And if we are gonna bring back all these thoughts of bringing back manufacturing to the US, reshoring manufacturing, we need to invest in automation and robotics, but we need to make it very easy for manufacturers to adopt automation. Now, when you do that, you need to see, okay, how is the spectrum of manufacturing in the US? Is every factory out there look like a Tesla production line? The answer is no. They look very different, right? There is oil on the floor. Was going into a factory the other day, that very old factory, where was gonna enter the restaurant and say, no, there are rats there. But there are the two streams, right? There is that stream, or okay, very old manufacturing, old school, but there is a lot of range in between, a lot of nice factories out there, but they are not at the level of automation like a Tesla factory will be. And as a matter of fact, 98.6% of manufacturers in the US, so almost all, are considered SMEs, small and medium enterprise. If you see the companies that really automate are this 1%. Those are highly automated, the GMs of the world, the Ford, the automotives. But the rest, they are still lagging behind. And there has been some automation on the front line, but there is still a lot to do on the end of line. And if you are still putting bags on a pallet manually, then that's a task that needs to be automated, right? Don't break your bag. There are now technologies that can help you. But there are so many technologies out there. I think we said that robots can do 80% of the tasks. There are many technologies. You go to Automate, for example, it's a big conference in Chicago on May 6th. You're going to see thousands of vendors. I just came from Modex a few weeks ago. That's the biggest supply chain event and trade show in the US, in Atlanta, and that was also the same. Like, I'm probably 1,500 vendors. Is like ridiculous how many, right? And this creates some analysis paralysis. Okay, who is going to help me automate? Like, where do I start? What if I get it wrong, right? There are so many options in front of me. I better not to take an option. Who's going to maintain it after that, right? This seems like a big project that will take months. I need a lot of capital to put that. What if I get it wrong and this is just collecting dust? So that's why we decide, okay, let's not just be another company that does AI on top of a robot. There are enough, and they're amazing, the ones that are out there. Let's go and use all the latest technologies in AI in particular, but at the top of the funnel, creating a platform that can serve for this kind of self-serve, where people can go there, get their questions answered, get the education that we mentioned before, that they need to make the right decision, right? You wouldn't go and buy a car without researching on the internet. Where do you do this kind of research? Where do you get that help? And at the same time, we put together a curated marketplace of all the vendors. We want to index this industry and get the best vendors in our platform. So it's very easy to compare what you need. And then at the end of the day, after the kind of discovery and design phase, get the right partner for the deployment and the support side of things. So we want to make it extremely easy and remove any barrier in order to get a robot in your shop floor that actually moves the needle, and you get it with better ROI and faster than the traditional way. But this is not like, it's also building in the assumption that we want to be the tide that lifts all boats, right? That we need to deploy more robots all together as an industry. But in order to do that, we cannot play in silos as we used to be doing. We have to aggregate and play together, and that we want to be that aggregator and that kind of simplifier, if you want, for the industry. It's a holistic view, right? It's not just one vertical, but hopefully step by step, we are very determined to make the cost of buying a robot, but also the cost of deploying a robot better for everybody.
And I was going to add, I guess, like, one to your point. I think, based on our conversation yesterday as a prep for this conversation, I think it's also important to recognize that a platform needs to provide kind of a turnkey solution in a sense, right? It's not just when we talk about robotics, at least until we're going to show, I think it's going to be a bit more clear. It's not just the confusion behind purchasing an arm, but it's also the confusion maybe on what does it take to get that into an entire cell that solves an actual business problem, right? So I think that there's obviously a decision challenge with the options of the arms, but also all the other peripherals, of which there could be, anywhere from a couple to hundreds, if not thousands. So I think it's very important to recognize that someone who's, let's say, I would love to get a robot arm, and I could probably program this, in my garage or somewhere in my house, but ultimately, not everyone is going to want to get to that level. So they want a turnkey solution that they can just, hey, I want to solve this problem. Here are maybe 2, 3 options. I'm going to order this. I have a team that's going to come in, help us integrate with what we have like on the existing shop floor, help us assemble everything, and we're just sort of taking care of the business and things that matter versus the robotics and all the hardware and tech, right?
Exactly. But I think you got it perfectly right. I never heard from a manufacturer, hey, I need a robot, right? The robot is not the solution to the problem. It's the solution. The entire package will solve your problem, right? You have the problem that your employees are lifting boxes that are 30 pounds during 8 hours, so they get injured. You get the problem that the quality is at 5% return from your end customer, and your customer is getting angry with you because you don't get the labor to actually properly do quality inspection. You get the problem that you cannot staff your end of line packaging lines, and now is costing you money. You're running at 70% capacity. You cannot take that new job that you wanted to bid because you don't have the people to do that. Those are the problems, right? And a robot arm is just a fancy kind of 6 degree of freedom kind of manipulator, right? It's like the most flexible way of automation, but actually it requires much more to automate. You sometimes need a conveyor. It's the 𝐴𝐵𝐺 farm tooling is essential. That will be the one that touches the product, right? Is where the rubber meets the road or whatever, whatever is that said. And it's also the safety part, because you want to deploy it in a safety way. It's the computing mechanism. Today it's also the AI, the cameras that go into it. So it's and you got it very well, and we are going to see it in a few minutes. Is this package, this solution to a problem that you have, right? Is you may need an arm. As I said, you're like an automation enthusiast. You want to have an arm just to play around with it, but most of the people want to do something, even if you want it for your garage, right? I had an employee in the past that bought a very cheap robot in the past, but it was for doing videos, right? Just kind of a camera, right? So there is always a purpose. And going back to the humanoid discussion at the very beginning of this podcast, that is also what kind of is missing today, right? It's missing that application at the end of the day that is done at kind of how are they the answer to a problem, and how do they solve it in an effective way. It will be in the future, is what is missing today. Same thing, like if you are moving things around your factory, you need a mobile robot, but it's also not only the mobile robot, it's what goes on top. So there is a lot of engineering that goes into these designs. Now, and related to this, I think it's also important to see the other side of the coin, right? We talk a lot about or a little bit about the manufacturers' problems, right? How they see what are their pains. Now look into the vendor side of things, right? Amazing companies out there. Now the sales cycles in automation are incredibly long. Can take more than 12 months. The cost that usually goes into making a sale is usually 15%, 15%. 15% of all the cost goes into pre-sales, kind of evangelizing the technology, convincing the customer. Now, where do you spend that money? If you spend it to the big guys, the 1%, you're going to get several robots, right? So that's where you want to spend your money. But the consequence of that is that the small, medium enterprise are a little bit left behind, because the goal for the payout is not that great, right? Okay, I say one robot after 12 months. So it's very hard to justify selling to SMEs or SMBs, even small business. but those are the ones that need the robots the most, right? So one thing that will, and then on the other side, because everything is very segmented, it's kind of everything is custom, right? So I don't know if you remember the Lego movie. It was saying everything is awesome. I'm not gonna sing just for the audience, but when I go to talk with the integrator, it looks like everything is custom. I'm gonna make a video one day making fun of that, but that's true. The problem of everything is custom is that you cannot charge customization enough. So your margins are very thin because you don't have a comparison point. Oh, you're doing this custom for me. So how do I know that this is the right price? What do I compare with? You get better margins, better economics when you standardize components. The standardization will drive also higher adoption, lower price, better margins. So it's very important to go into this mentality of, well, let's do as much turnkey and standard solution. There is still tons of applications that can only be automated custom, but few palletizers need to be custom, right? A lot of them can be used with off-the-shelf components. Same for packaging. There are so many applications that lend itself very well to this more standardization. And there are companies like, for example, Tyson Foods that have gone into that path from every single application that we do is one-off with my local integrator to, no, we are all going to use this palletizer, period. That may be a little bit inefficient, but on the other side, you get the economy of scale, right? Imagine that still your laptop, everyone was different, right? And there's a lot of standardization there that allow us to get better economics at the end of the day.
Absolutely, and I think that's sort of what everyone is trying to push towards. But I think our industry is also how to say it, let's call it, there's challenges, right, to standardize things, but both on the robotics and on like the control side. And again, I think that's a whole other, we can probably talk about like 3 hours on the benefits and the challenges of standardization. But I do want to get into, I guess, you showing us, I guess, the platform a bit more specifically. And so I guess, again, in my mind, up until now, I think the challenges that you would need to overcome is obviously you need to curate maybe the OEMs as well as understand maybe the challenges of the end users. And you also need to, I guess, put in some engineering work. And I don't know if it's, if it's you specifically, your group, or maybe the OEM that creates these custom like cells, solutions, however you call them, that also requires quite a bit of effort, right? Because ultimately they are not easy, as we discussed, to put together up front, but ultimately can then be purchased as packages. And I guess, like, could you elaborate like how that works as you like present that as well, and maybe what were some of the challenges that you've solved with the platform?
Yeah, from the and now you can see, give you a sneak peek, and we will share the link later so people can play around with it. Let's obviate for a second the cool AI aspect of it, so I'm gonna hide it. But to the points before, right? There are a bunch of products that people can buy, like a robot arm, like a AMR. Now we're talking about the problems that we said before. Are the solutions are the ones that really will solve a problem ultimately, right? To your point, there are solutions here that we have designed as reference, like as a reference design. So, for example, this palletizer that you see on the screen with 2 pallets, 1 inbound conveyor, a slip seat holder that you can purchase. There are also solutions that come from our partners. Now, the interesting thing, this is, for example, a solution from an integrator. Before, this integrator was selling really solutions, right? Now they are able to sell products. So this becomes a product, all standardized. Now there is never nothing that is 100% turnkey. And that's where we come in. We can come and adapt and customize it to take care of this 10 to 20% of customization needed, right? What I said, hey, get rid of customization. There is always a need for customization, and trying just to limit it as much as possible. What we give is a new channel for all these companies to sell their products. And I like to think about that as a 4D problem. One is the discovery side. How do you discover what you need? That can be done like the traditional way, browsing up the different solutions, or using our assistants. Like, hey, I'm tired of moving things around. So by interacting with an AI that has been trained with all the knowledge in automation that we could find, now it guides you. And it's not only about the answers that it gives you, but also the questions that it asks. The questions that it asks back to, at the end, try to help you find the right solution. As you are talking with it, the view on the right side gets updated, either with products or solutions that fit your needs. That way it's kind of a new way of shopping automation, right? You may not need this kind of hand holding for buying something in Amazon, even though sometimes I wish they had that for something more sophisticated. But you definitely, if you are going to commit $157,000, you will appreciate having some guidance on, okay, how do I compare what is the difference between these two palletizers? What is, can this work in my cold room, my cold storage? Is this IP67 certified or not? What is the typical cost, right? Because when I go to a manufacturer, if I ask today, okay, what is the price of a palletizer? I get usually two things. Either people think that this costs like $5,000, is extremely cheap, or people on the other spectrum that think, oh, this is going to cost me $1 million. And the reality is that is the case because where do you find this transparent pricing out there? So we wanted from day one to get transparent pricing into our platform to get an idea that, okay, if this is too expensive for you, then we stop the conversation here. But if that's something that that you can justify, and we also have ROI calculators to help you justify the investment in automation, because cost is only one factor, then you can continue the discovery either with our assistants or talking with a human at any point in time. From the point of view of the solution providers, also to your point, there is some work in the back of standardization of the components. But the reality is that a lot of the integration partners that we talk to, they were already in that path. They were already in the path to create turnkey solutions that they could resell or that they could install more quickly to add more, to increase the bandwidth of deployments that they could take, the throughput. So we are giving them a channel now to really fulfill that initiative that already started off. Okay, let's kind of curate some solutions that we can that can be the base of our deployments, so we can deploy more, so we can reduce the cost.
If I can maybe ask a quick question just to clarify for those who might be listening versus viewing right now, because we do publish this on podcast form as well. So if you're listening to us, again, Juan is showing us the interface that we'll post the link to as well, so you can access and ultimately see for yourself. But you're also presenting prices, right? And that's going to be one, just to be clear for those who are listening again, the prices are for the entire solution / cell. And then there's a way to then, let's say, get in touch with you to customize that and ultimately have your team either, assemble it, put it together, or integrate it at the facility, right? Which can be then figured out, I guess, once you get in touch with Reshape. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we are gonna, as you said, thanks for pointing that out. If you go to app.reshapeautomation.com/join, you can create an account and we'll give you access, and you can play with our assistants and see our marketplace and start buying some robots. But to your point, there are two components of it, and we are very unique on this front. There are people that have amazing companies that have amazing engineering teams inside, amazing automation engineers, that they just want the solution, they're going to install it. They know the process better than we do. They have the capabilities to program robots and to get it aligned and to automate their process. So they can just buy the equipment. It's going to show up at the doorstep with some instruction how to put it together, and off they go. Now, on the other stream, there are the people that want us, for example, some hand-holding that we do the entire installation, like a more traditional system integrator. And in this case, they can reach out, add an integration package, and either our integration team or one of our partners will happily integrate that for them, more the traditional way with a FAT and SAT to make sure that the system meets the requirements of the customer. After that, we also offer support packages, so they can, for every application that we sell, every solution, there is also the option to purchase a support package, so that even if there is your requirements change or the operation is not as you expected, we can we remove the risks of operating this kind of equipment. So it's kind of peace of mind. To also for the people that are not seeing it, on the left side of your experience, what is different from a traditional marketplace is that we have curated a set of agents that are AI powered that can answer any question that you have around automation. You can say things as high level as, I'm tired of moving things around, or you can ask questions more specific about our catalog, like, hey, how much weight can I carry with a specific AMR? Right? That in turn will help the user to define, okay, these are my, now I have at my fingerprints the power of all the resources out there in automation, so I can make a more informed decision. The interesting thing also about that is that that will be okay. As I said, we are very unique in our approach that you can install it yourself, we can do it for you, and everything in between. And this fact that it's not black and white, but gray, we try to cover all the people that are out there that we encounter, all the manufacturers where I would love to have that. I cannot afford the price tag of the integration side. Is there an alternative for me? Let's say that you buy 10 palletizers. So we could install the first one, tell you how to do that, and then you do the other 9. Or you do it yourself, but you have a question while you are programming the robot. You can call us too. So we are very flexible on the amount of integration help that we can provide in order to ultimately reduce the cost for the customer, right? Increasing the ROI at the end of the day. This is the ultimate goal, right? If you think about, we talk about that a solution is more than a robot arm, and we talked before also about all the hardware components that go into a solution. What is also not obvious to a lot of manufacturers is that usually the integration time, the time that it takes, or the cost that it takes to program and deploy a robotic cell can be 1/3 at minimum of the cost of the hardware. So if you want this palletizer completely installed, you may be looking into the $200,000. If you can do it yourself, you may be saving $40,000. So that is another way that we have to increase the ROI, because we recognize that not everybody runs 3 shifts and has the potential to use some of these solutions right away or justify them with pure economic reasons. Again, there are so many other reasons besides like ergonomic issues and the happiness of your employees that come into play. But from a pure financial aspect, and a lot of these decisions are decided on a spreadsheet, comes down to, okay, what are my savings for using this? How much can I grow? And that is what we help them and try to make it as easy as possible. Now, just to complete the demo here, we don't stop at the purchase side. I mean, yes, you can buy some items directly from us, but we also continue with kind of helping you along the way with the management things. And that is something that was a pain in my in any single project that I've done in the past is
Mhm.
clarifying the requirements. This what you see is what you get.
Mhm.
Right? How many times you show up and there is a new SKU that you need to run there. And okay, when did we discuss that? Like having those firm requirements that facilitate, then the discussion is easy. Then okay, if it's not written there, let's do a change order, right? Let's move on. So that is supposed to be there. We want to be extremely transparent all the way and facilitate the conversations between the user at the end, the customer, and the integrator, which may be us or one of our partners, of amazing partners that we have in our network. As I said, the ultimate goal is higher ROI, getting it faster, and increase the happiness of the automation decision. Right? And we think that this automation journey doesn't start at when the robot is installed in an operation. It actually starts when you are feeling this pain of labor in some cases, and we want to help all the way until that is in your shop floor.
Absolutely. Juan, I think that this is great. And I guess first, I love the transparency. I love as we kind of look at what industry is and where it's going, the fact that more and more groups are being as transparent as possible. And I think all of us, the three of us here, and probably a lot of our listeners know how difficult it is to be transparent as to, hey, I would like to go buy a palletizer. How much is a palletizer going to cost, right? There are nearly infinite numbers of variabilities in there to be able to go ahead and give a number, but to be able to go ahead and give a starting point, I think is amazing. As Vlad and I were discussing yesterday, I think it helps lots of executives and lots of most people who are not nearly as good as guessing prices as some of us are on having an idea of how much something is going to cost so they can at least go ahead and budget for that. But I guess I want to ask you the question because we could certainly talk about what you've built for probably 20 more hours. But I want to go ask you the question so we can continue on. As you had a really good point earlier where you talked about very few people want to go buy robots, right? Like most people who are here are going and looking and saying, hey, I need to solve this problem. I need a palletizer, or I need a case packer, or I need something to go and solve my problem. How have your conversations changed from the we sell robots to the we go solve solutions? Come pick what your solution is, and then we can come help build that for you.
So usually it's definitely easier in person, right? It's easier when we go to a factory. There's no doubt about that. We are trying our best to educate, if you want, or Gen AI. And by the way, happy to talk about deep diving about this all Gen AI during the Robotics Summit and Expo. That will be the topic of but what we like to do is something called, as I said, much easier in person, is to do something called like application judo. So what is that? So when we go to a factory, usually there is a task that everybody hates doing, and it's usually the hardest. Like I have a wire harness application that I want you to solve, and that is hard, right? And wire harnessing is probably the hardest application out there to automate. But at the same time, that is hard. But you have still a person feeding a pad printer, and I saw also another worker kind of breaking his back, putting the tallest pallet I ever seen in my life. Can we start with that, right? I think it's important to, particularly for companies starting automation, to first crawl, then walk, and then run, right? So let's start with some wins, easy wins. I don't like this low-hanging fruit because it has some other connotations, right? But there are some applications that are easier than others. Some that are slam dunks that just make sense. We have an entire methodology of how do we rank them when we go into a site visit. And let's start with that. Understand what it does mean to now have a robot as your workforce. How does it really impact the other workforce, which usually is like the operators like to work on that cell because their life is easier. So it's actually a great retention mechanism too. And then go for there, and then eventually get to the more complicated ones and the more difficult applications, if it is at all possible. Right? Let's not start with the frontier, if you want, of where tech is, but something that we know that it's going to work, you're going to be happy, and then move from there. And the more difficult ones, the more dexterous, where actually you need more brain power, let's still use humans, right? Nothing replaces a human worker. It's very difficult. We are amazing tools, if you want. We are amazing resources, but let's use the best of both worlds, the best of your human labor, and now get into your tool belt. What does it mean to have a robot kind of labor?
Absolutely. And Juan, if I can, I do want to ask you, I guess, on the Gen AI side,
Yeah.
right? And again, obviously not to get your entire talk from Robotics Summit, but I'm curious, maybe what are some areas where you believe it is, well, I guess, where is it already applied, and maybe where it's going to be applied? Because I think, you showcased that it definitely can be used to, let's say, find the right robot. Can it also be used to troubleshoot, program, maybe integrate, all of the above? I guess, like, what are you seeing on the robotics side when it comes to Gen AI?
So, in general, for every AI application out there, the only successful ones that are out there running in the wild have two characteristics. Either there is a human in the loop, or the cost of failure is low. So that's why it takes so long to get autonomous cars right, because if you get it wrong, then bad things happen. Like, the cost of getting things wrong is huge, right? When I work in introducing AI into manufacturing, some of my first applications, it's not a coincidence that beam picking was the first thing that everybody jumped into, because it really doesn't matter if you miss a pick. You just need to keep up, right? Doing assembly is a different story, because when you're doing assembly, if you do it wrong, bad things can happen on the line, right? Even things can explode. But the first line, I did an application in the past where if we had to drill a battery, like it was imagine an electronic device, you had to make sure that if there was a battery or not, and the next step was drilling. If you get it wrong, the entire factory will explode. So no, AI was not perfect for that. We used 10 other methods, right, for making sure that we were right. But to the point, Gen AI is the same. Every single application out there, you need either one of these two components, having a human, or the cost of failure is low. The nice thing about Gen AI is that there is a human in the loop, right? There is always someone that checks your answer. That's why ChatGPT doesn't have to be perfect. So it's not the end of the world if we tell you we are curating and making them as precise as possible. But sometimes we may get a recommend you something that actually doesn't fit your needs. But, well, we are showing you one picture more than less, right? But to your point, I think that's why it's so successful, because it's a copilot. It's something that enhances humans. It's not supposed to replace and take the decisions from you. It's not like, hey, buy me a robot. You play a button, the AI finds that for you and shows up at your factory tomorrow, right? We are not there yet. I wouldn't trust also that it creates the entire code for your robot, but it can be an excellent copilot. It can be something that, well, if this is one palletizer I already deployed, can you generate 90% of the code? Most likely, yes. Mm-hmm. And as you said, where we are seeing this is using these agents. Now we use it for discovery. Soon we are going to use it for design. Let's say that you want to, for example, have a different orientation of the conveyor. You can just talk with it, and the design will change. It's going to be parameterizable. So every design that you see there, you will be able to modify that conversationally. But then eventually it also goes into the support side of things. And I see a lot of value in there, because we have all the manuals, you have all the instructions. Like number one ticket that I used to get in the past was, hey, we lost power. Why is the robot not working? It was written like, well, you need to restart the IPC. But nobody reads the manual. In this case, you can just ask an agent, and the agent will say, yes, why don't you check this? And show you a picture of that. So the beauty of this is that ultimately there is also a human in the loop. There is the operator there that can infuse their judgment. But I see that more like a sandwich, right? That is human, AI, human, versus what I was trying to do most of my career was AI on top of robot. And then you need to be 99.999% precise, and that's very hard, right? It's much
Absolutely.
easier.
Juan, I think that that's going to be a super interesting conversation. So again, if you guys are going to be at the Robotics Summit, please go ahead and check out its generative AI's impact on robotics. It is Monday the 2nd at 11:30 a.m. At 257B is the room location. I can go ahead and get it. I can't currently go ahead and drop a link to it, but as we are able to, we will go ahead and do that. Juan, this is a conversation that could go on for another 7 hours, but given the fact that we still have like 36 people listening, we will go ahead and ask you the normal wrap-up questions with the promise that we continue this and get the story of how you and Carlos started Reshape Automation on the next go around. But Juan, I feel like the last series of conversations have very easily set up my most favorite wrap-up question is, can you predict the future? And I guess I would really like to know what you think that the future of robotics looks like, please.
The answer is no, I cannot. Okay. Stop. So let's play with my crystal ball here. And I think more and more people are going to realize that manufacturers that automation can be an answer. It's not always the answer, but can be an answer. It's a good tool to have in your tool belt. That the cost of goods, the cost of automation is going to go down of the hardware side, and the amount of capabilities of robots are going to go up. So I can only foresee a more automated future where the role also now playing a little bit with AI will continue to support and help humans to do more with less. I think that's ultimately the goal.
No, that is perfect. Thank you so much for that. I certainly think it will be an interesting future. Next, we'd like to ask for some career advice, and perhaps we could get you to have some career advice for people who have been also bitten by the startup bug and would perhaps like to go spend the next some number of their years in startups. So what's the best advice that you have for them?
I think I used to make the analogy that robotics engineers are like Renaissance engineers. You know, in the Renaissance, like your Leonardo da Vinci used to like paint, create airplanes. It was very multidisciplinary, and that's even more true today. You need to know controls. You need to know now machine learning, like vision. It's very multidisciplinary software, and it's better to embrace it, right? To create that kind of jack of all trades, being also good vertically in a specific domain, but understanding also more and more software and more AI, right, as we are going. I don't see like a near future where I said these foundational models purely write and do everything on the robot, and it works fantastic. But that's a future, like again, it's if, but not when. So knowing more and more what AI can do in robotics and software will impact the most, will be very impactful for your career. I would say also start with the problem. It helps a lot having work in manufacturing in a real factory, and then work from there, because you will understand the real problems that are out there, that are not the fancy ones. It's like, yes, my machine doesn't, like I lost power yesterday. How do I make this work, right? And really make you appreciate the real world and not just the academic problems. On the advice on the startup side of things, again, I'm also starting in my journey, so I can also get a lot of advice myself. What I can say is find the right partners on the mentorship side. It helps a lot to get the right mentors, and you can reach out anytime. By the way, I'm happy to share my 2 cents with you. But also on the investing side, it's very important to get the right mix, because they're going to be with you, like kind of on this journey. The right co-founder too, right? This has to be a team, and it's all about the team at the end. It's just, as easy as it sounds and cheesy as it sounds, is the team that will make you fail or succeed. It's not so much the cool idea you have. Like everybody has 1,000 ideas and more in the shower, right? But is the execution will make it or not, or break it, and ultimately it's your team. And in that sense, I'm blessed to have the team that I have. But it's putting the right team together makes a lot of sense, and grow at the right speed, right? Grow at the speed that you feel you should be growing. We passed from some bubbles where it was everything grow, and now I think we have demonstrated, or many companies have demonstrated, that you can be doing a lot with less, and that it's not about how big you are in terms of size, but the impact that you can make. And if you consider any other startup in other world, no, do it in robotics, because this is the coolest time to be building something in the atoms world and not so much in the beast world.
Absolutely. No, I think that all of that is fantastic advice, Juan. We would like to ask for a book recommendation. Do you have a book recommendation for I guess, Vlad and I, but maybe also the audience?
Okay, I'll give you two. On robotics, I think the book that changed me and a lot of people in the industry is Probabilistic Robotics by Dieter Fox and also Sebastian Thurn and Wolfram Burger. But it was like really a kind of the first book where it was not about everything in robots is deterministic. Now there is also probabilities to be done. I really spearhead a lot of work in AMRs and other areas of probabilistic robotics. And on the outside robots, I'm one of these big fans of the Roman Empire. So if you are like a lot of apparently men in TikTok that like to talk about the Roman Empire, there is a Spaniard author called 𝐡𝐮𝐤𝐽, and I love his trilogy Africanus. I think it's amazing. So if you want to learn about how these Romans managed to conquer the known world a few centuries ago, then check it out.
No, that's awesome, Juan. Thank you so much for that. And then the last question for you as we wrap up is who should reach out to you? How can our listeners help you either at the summit, at the trade shows, as you're growing Reshape, kind of all of the above? How can our listeners help you?
Well, several ways, right? As I said, I like to be wrong, and I like feedback. So feedback on what we are building, right? Go to app.reshapeautomation/join and play with it. Play with our marketplace and our agents. See if that brings value to your operations. Give us feedback. I'm very easy to reach on LinkedIn or at juan@reshapeautomation.com. You are a manufacturer, you wanna get started with automation, you don't know how, we are here to help. Be the partner, not just a transaction, but be a partner and help you navigate this complicated world of automation and take you by the hand if you need on this automation journey, or point you in the right direction, right? We don't need to own the entire process, but we want to be of help. So I think how can you help us is actually letting us help you. That's probably the turn that I will make to that.
Absolutely, Juan. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for taking the time to come spend with Vlad and I and the listeners. We haven't had a ton of questions today, but we have like nearly 3 dozen people who are still listening to us. So I would imagine there are lots of questions that they want to keep close to their chest, and hopefully you'll be able to go ahead and have some of those conversations. Again, we want to thank the folks at the Robotics Summit and Expo for sponsoring this episode. And if you guys have made it this far, make sure you're following Juan in Reshape Automation. Make sure you're following Manufacturing Hub, as well as Vlad and myself on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and beyond. Until next week, when we continue our conversation in robotics. We'll talk to everyone soon.